it feels almost like this was written by a white person in blackface. Hey everybody, it's Jonathan and I'm back with another video, and I'm here to talk about all of the books that I read in the year 2022. This is a part of my wrap-up series for the year. I am recording this after New Year's. However, I'm proud of myself for recording this video at all. So I did say in my top 5 books of 2022 that I would do a video where I recap everything that I read during the year. So if you are interested in seeing everything that I read in the year 2022, keep watching and let's get right into this video. So keeping track of the books I read in 2022 was a little bit complicated. I started off the year trying to use Storygraph, continue using Storygraph, and I really just could not get into using that app. I really enjoy the sort of like social media, the interactive element that comes with using Goodreads, even though I don't want to use Goodreads. I want to get away from using Goodreads, but I think that that interactive element, seeing, you know, what other people are posting, people being able to see what I post and then actually commenting and liking and, you know, seeing how people feel about things, that just is one of those better parts. Like, I could just keep track of books myself. If I'm using an app, if I'm using a social media site, I would prefer to use something like Goodreads. So if Storygraph can like upgrade itself and add some of those elements, like, I understand they don't want to be a social media website, but that's what's going to get people on there, in my opinion. I didn't really start tracking on Goodreads until like mid-year. Honestly, I kind of had to backtrack and remember what I had read. So in 2022, I also was hosting the Black and Loved book club at Prologue Bookshop. So we did a couple of rereads for me in that group when we were just getting started in picking books. I did pick a couple that I have already read and were familiar with and just wanted people to enjoy as we were picking our first couple of books. So I did do a couple of rereads and tracking was a little off. So I didn't read as much as I wanted to. I probably read like maybe a book a month, and then I had some months where I did read a couple. So I did end the year in terms of new books reading 20 new books. The rest were rereads and other things that I can honestly not remember reading. So I'm going to tell you about the 20 books that I read in the year 2022. I'm not going to give super long reviews or a super long synopsis of the books, but just give you a little taste of what I read. Try not to talk about each book for longer than like a minute, so this video isn't super long. Let's get into the books that I read in the year 2022. So I'm looking at my 2022 reading challenge. It makes me sad. This year, if you follow me on Goodreads, my goal is 100 books. I need to get back. I need to really get into everything, and that's going to include like the children's books that I read, novellas, graphic novels, everything. Like, I need to hit 100, so hold me to that. And also on my Patreon, I will be keeping track of everything that I read during the week. So if you want to subscribe to my Patreon for that and other subscriber perks, definitely do so. The link is in the description box below. So I guess the first book that I counted was a book that I had started in the year 2021. I actually read it with a group during, reading it during reading sprints in 2021. And it was for Black History Month in the UK. So we each picked a book by a UK author, and I felt like this fit. So Rainbow Milk by Paul Mendez. The main character, Jesse, is Jehovah's Witness. So it starts off in the 1950s following this boxer who is blind. And then it jumps to the present day, and it mainly follows the present day character Jesse, who's Jehovah's Witness. His parents find out that he is queer. They call a priest to his home one day, try to sort of like pray the gay away in a way, and then so Jesse leaves home. He sort of like is trying to live on his own and exist on his own. He becomes a sex worker and just is sort of like discovering living life as a queer Black man in the UK. And this book was really good because I was able to learn a little bit more about just Black life, modern life in the UK. It's not something that I know a ton about. I do follow a lot of Black booktubers. And so it's always interesting to hear their perspectives on certain things, especially reading like books that were written by like Black Americans, and so versus Black Brits. So that's something that was very interesting to read, and a little bit of British history in terms of like the treatment of Black people. And so I think that Rainbow Milk was overall a really good book. I really enjoyed it. Towards the end, it kind of drifted a little bit for me, but I think it was a very compelling read. If you're wanting to read a very like real, blunt description of Black life in the UK. So I would definitely recommend Rainbow Milk by Paul Mendez. It's a really great read, and it's in paperback now, so definitely recommend. Next up, Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This was a book that I had read the description of, and I was like, okay, this sounds kind of interesting. So it follows two fathers, Ike Randolph and Buddy Lee. These two men, one white, Buddy Lee, and Ike is Black, and they're connected by the fact that both of their sons were married, and they both were not very accepting of their son's sexuality. But the tragic turn is that both of their sons were murdered, and so they're trying to figure out who killed their sons, and also kind of going through sort of like reflecting on their regrets as fathers and their relationship with their sons, and also kind of building a relationship with each other. I was a little bit weary going into this book because I didn't know where exactly it was going to go, and I think I actually talked about that when I reviewed the book in one of my wrap-ups. But I did appreciate the story. I thought that it was a really compelling read. As they're on this journey to find out who killed their sons, I think that the action and the humor really makes this book overall very enjoyable. And so I'm actually looking forward to reading some of S.A. Cosby's other books. He also wrote Blacktop Wasteland, and he has a new book that recently came out also. And I did recently get an arc of another book that is coming out in 2023, which is actually Questlove and S.A. Cosby. So I plan on reading that, and I definitely will be reviewing that book when I get to it. After that, of course, I read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi, and I have reviewed that book thoroughly. It made my top 5 of 2022. In addition to me also doing a standalone review of the book. So definitely check out that review and check out my top 5 of 2022 if you want to hear more about that book. Next up is a book that I read with my book club, the Black and Love Book Club at Prologue Bookshop. And it was a book that I really wanted to read when it first came out because Ta-Nehisi Coates did a blurb on the front of it. And if you've watched me, you know that I love Ta-Nehisi Coates as an author. When the final revival of Opal and Nev came out, I was like, okay, this sounds interesting. But then I ended up not reading it, and then it came out in paperback. And the paperback cover is completely different from the hardcover, and I definitely think that might lead it to a different audience. This one definitely seems like it has more of like those, like, you know, it has the Vogue blurbs and Oprah Mag blurbs and everything versus like a serious Ta-Nehisi Coates blurb on the front. So I think they're marketing it just a tad bit differently. Basically, it followed this journalist as Sunny Shelton, and she is writing about the comeback of this group, Opal and Nev. She is an investigative journalist. She's a music journalist. And so, but she has a connection to Opal and Nev because her father was a drummer for the group. And he was tragically killed. And so we're sort of like going down her trying to track down Opal and Nev and interview them. And it sort of follows her really like curating this story, building up this story about the group. And so she's writing like this, I think she's writing a novel, it's like a biography or something, on Opal and Nev. And so the novel is sort of like this, I would say, is interviews. There's dialogue, but it also is really just as Sunny Shelton and her conversations with Opal and Nev and the people that all were around during the time that they were coming up, during their popularity. And yeah, so there's just a lot going on in this book. It's kind of hard to describe, I think, because going into it, you wouldn't expect it to be what it is actually about. But it was overall really good. I did enjoy it. I think that it was different from what I expected, and so I think that it's worth the read. I still haven't read Daisy Jones and the Six, so I don't know if the comparisons are valid. Well, I would encourage everybody to check it out. Next up is Punch Me Up to the Gods by Brian Broome, and I read this during the summer. And this is a memoir, so a nonfiction read from this year. And Brian Broome is actually from Ohio. And this really chronicles his early life growing up in Ohio, Black and queer, and just him, you know, his experiences as a Black queer man who kind of always like felt like an outsider his entire life. This entire memoir is framed around Gwendolyn Brooks' poem "We Real Cool," and I felt like this was such a beautifully written, reflective story of a young Black man. So I was left with a lot of questions. I really want to eventually interview Brian Broome and have a conversation with him about this book. It would be really great to just hear where he's at now, because the book leaves you in sort of like this very, like, you're almost like unsettled in a way. You're like, I really want to know like who he is now. So if you're interested in reading like a really good Black queer memoir, I definitely would encourage you to pick up Punch Me Up to the Gods. It's really good. I read Kings of Bboy, and so I actually was able to get a finished copy of this book when I went to Phoenix, Arizona for a book conference, and our Eric Thomas was supposed to be there, but unfortunately he was not there. But I got a finished copy of the book. I was super excited to read it, and I actually wound up listening to this on audio, and it's just an incredibly heartwarming story about two queer Black boys growing up in Baltimore. It's about friendship, self-discovery, and just overall adventure. And so it revolves around this boy Harrison and his best friend Linus. Unfortunately, Linus tells Harrison that he is moving away from Baltimore with his father. And so Harrison is like, I need to do something to make his last day here the best that he has ever had, so that he'll always remember me as his friend. Because Harrison doesn't have a lot of friends. Even like Harrison and Linus, they haven't necessarily admitted to each other that they are like best friends. They're just like the closest people that they have to each other. And so Harrison wants to leave a lasting impression, and so he plans like this like Ferris day, like Ferris Bueller day off, where they skip work and just go out and have a great adventure, a time to remember. And so they do this and they go to a ton of different places. Well, he tries to get him to go to a ton of different places. And there's a little, issues pop up along the way. But I just think that this was a beautiful book that also, like, sort of like a lot of the books that I read this year, the characters are really like reflecting on who they are. And I think that it's just a beautiful depiction of young Black friendship between two queer boys and two queer Black boys. And I would have loved to have had a book like this when I was in high school. Just being able to read about somebody that sounds like me. And it in a way, it almost reminded me of like me and my best friend during like the beginning of our friendship during high school. And I think that the characters were lovely. The perspective was really fresh. And I could not stop listening to this book. So Kings of Bboy is a book that I definitely want more people to read. And it was beautiful kind of reading about Baltimore, because I don't know a lot about Baltimore and the DMV in general. So I think that this was a really beautifully written book, and I knew it was going to be good because of all the blurbs that were on the back. Ryan Douglas, who wrote The Taking of Jake Livingston, the author of Darius the Great Is Not Okay, and also Julian Winters, who wrote a couple of queer young adult books. So yeah, I definitely think that this is like a good summer read, good summer young adult read. So definitely check out Kings of More by R. Eric Thomas. So Nightcrawling, I also read Nightcrawling by Leilla Motley. That also made my top 5 of 2022. Definitely would encourage everybody to check out my video where I talk about my top 5, because it offers a little bit more description of that book, but definitely would encourage y'all to pick that up. I read Tumble by Celia C. Perez. Tumble was an incredibly heartwarming book. It was a really good exploration of like family, culture, identity, and definitely some secrets. It follows Addie as she comes to learn more about her absent biological father, and she really advocates for herself with her mother, you know, and really just wants to take this risk in discovering who her father is and more about her family. And so I think that this was a beautiful representation of Latin American culture, a really unique appreciation for the art of wrestling. Like, it's always great to see somebody take on something. It almost reminded me of like Lupe Wong Wong Dance, where you have like a girl in a story that, you know, loves wrestling and is really into, you know, sports, and it sort of just like encourages you know, young girls of color to play different sports, like wrestling and baseball and different things like that. So I really thought that Tumble offered something really great and really new to a middle grade audience, and these middle grade authors are really doing the damn thing. I've loved every single middle grade book that I've read recently, so I would highly encourage everybody to check out Tumble by Celia C. Perez. Another read, Alive at the End of the World by Saeed Jones. I talked about that in my top 5 of 2022. Amazing book of poetry. Definitely check out my video for more about that. Along with My Government Means to Kill Me by Rasheed Newson, another great book. And this is also Rasheed Newson's debut novel. I'm excited to see where he goes next. I have to read this book again, honestly. So definitely check out my video where I talk more about My Government Means to Kill Me. I think it's a must read for Black queer folks. I think it's a must read for queer folks in general, learning more about history. Y'all, time to get into the romances. So I read Fake It Till You Bake It by Jamie Wesley, and Fake It Till You Bake It is so I saw somebody talk about this and they did not like the book, but I loved it, and everybody I've recommended it to has loved it. So it follows Jada Townsend Matthews, and so Jada was on a reality show, and she ends up not accepting the proposal. It's like a bachelor sort of show. She ends up not accepting the proposal of the man on the show. Something wasn't right, and you're sort of like figuring out like maybe why she said no to the proposal like throughout the entire book. But she said no to the proposal, and basically everybody was like, oh, like she's a terrible person, she led him on. And so she's getting like a lot of hate on social media because people disagree with the fact that she didn't accept the proposal. So she comes into this this cupcake shop with her friend, and she's kind of just like in a bad mood, and so she insults the cupcakes. Little does she know that the owner of the cupcake shop is right there. It's owned by this football player named Donovan, and Donovan is like, he's kind of like a grumpy guy, but he loves baking, and he kind of was just like, you know, how are you going to talk about my cupcakes and you haven't even tried one yet? So she tries the cupcake, and she low-key likes it, but she doesn't let him know that. And so she leaves, goes about her day. Little does she know that, and little does Donovan know that Jada is actually the granddaughter of the owner of the football team that Donovan plays for. And Jada's grandmother is like, if you don't get a real job after being on that foolish reality show, if you don't get a real job by the end of the year, then you're not gonna get your sort of like inheritance. And so Jada's grandmother is basically like, you have to work at the cupcake shop. That's going to be your real job. And so her and Donovan have to like reconnect. And I just thought that this was a very fun read. I didn't take it too seriously. I've heard some of the critiques, people like, not feeling like it was believable, but I thought that the relationship was, really good. The way that they sort of, these like enemies to lovers come together, this close proximity, romance comes together. I love both of the characters. I think that, Donovan with like, being like this football player that's also very, soft, really has a heart of gold, is beautiful. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great like break from reading some more serious stuff, and I enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend everybody check out Fake It Till You Bake It if you're looking for a good romance. Next up, of course, and I didn't even grab this one, Boys Come First by Aaron Foley. This was a 10 out of 10. Would highly recommend. Amazing sort of book that just has great Black queer friendship in it, and it just felt different from a lot of things that I have read. I think that Black queer authors are really offering some great literature, that's for us. So I would highly recommend checking out Boys Come First. I also include that in my top 5 of 2022. People will call it like the Black gay Sex in the City, the waiting to exhale comparisons for like Black queer people. And so I think that it holds up to those really those really like standout comparisons. And I'm excited to see more from Aaron Foley. I'm excited to see more from Black queer authors, what they're able to author. And Robert Jones Jr. did the front blur for this book, so I knew it was going to be good right then and there. I do not have a copy of this book on me because I let one of my friends borrow it, but I did read Bboy Blues by James Earl Hardy, and this is a book that I had been planning on reading for years. And I sort of like my excitement was reignited when James Earl Hardy announced that Jussie Smollett was actually producing the film adaptation of this book. And so I did do a full review of Bboy Blues along with a review of the movie. So definitely go check that out if you want more details about it. But Bboy Blues was a book that was written in, I don't want to get this wrong. The book was originally published in 1994, and so I would highly encourage everybody to check that out if you do want a book that has that 90s vibe. It has, like, it talks about 90s music, and it's just very 90s, and then the film is sort of updated. So read the book, check out the movie, let me know what you think in the comments below or on the comments on that video. Next two are romances, and one of them is actually an Audible exclusive. It is Crimes of Passion by Jack Harbon. And this was like a very random listen to me. It's sort of like, I think it's like a novella, short story almost. Crimes of Passion follows these two crime podcasters, and they can't stand each other. They end up finding out that a young girl before she passed away actually really wanted them to collaborate. And so they have to collaborate on this. They wind up collaborating on this crime podcast. And so it brings them in close proximity with each other. And, things take a turn. And I actually listened to this on my way home from work. And then when I was cooking dinner, like later that night, and it was really good. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. But yeah, I would definitely check it out. It's an Audible exclusive. I honestly don't know if it's available in any sort of like hardcover form, but definitely would check it out. And I want to see more from the author. So I'm going to check out more from Jack Harbon and see if I can get into more of their work. So definitely would recommend listening to Crimes of Passion by Jack Harbon. Ooh, there are a lot of romances. I did not realize I was reading as much romance as I was. So the next up is By the Book by Jasmine Guillory, and this was actually the first full novel that I have read from Jasmine Guillory. I have picked up a couple of her other books. I just know that she writes Black romances, and so I was like, definitely let me go check this out. You know, it's a book, a romance that revolves around books. It follows Isabel, and she works for a publishing company. One of the biggest tasks that she actually has is working with this guy, Bo Towers, and he signed a deal, got an advance and everything to publish this tell-all memoir. And unfortunately, he hasn't turned in anything. And like the deadlines are coming and going, and he just is not giving them anything at all. Isabel volunteers to go out, meet him while she is out in LA. I think it's LA. Santa Barbara. Y'all, my geography is off. Anyway, she goes there, volunteers to get him to offer some sort of update or, you know, turn in something. And she winds up staying there for a while to work with him. And so another one of those close proximity sorts of things. I really enjoyed this. I thought that it was a good romance. It paced itself well. It sort of built up that tension. And I thought that Isabel, you know, she's also somebody that really wants to write herself. And so I think that her sort of getting a chance to work closely with Bo, and the way that they she's able to sort of unlock her, you know, her true passion for writing and really, you know, work on herself while also working with him and working through things with him is really good. And so I thoroughly enjoyed this one, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. And I also read another one, which is How I Ended My Year, surprisingly. So after that, I read the only Toni Morrison book that I read this year. You know, I had taken a break from Toni. Oh wait, no. I ended up rereading The Bluest Eye again. I've read that book like 5 or 6 times at this point. But I read Home. And Home follows Frank Money, who joined the army to escape his too small world. He left behind his cherished and fragile little sister, C. After the war, his shattered life had no purpose until he hears that C is in danger. Frank is a modern Odysseus, returning to a 1950s America mined with lethal pitfalls for an unwary Black man. As he journeys to his native Georgia in search of C, it becomes clear that their troubles began well before their wartime separation. Together, they return to their rural hometown of Lotus, where buried secrets are unearthed and where Frank learns at last what it means to be a man, what it takes to heal, and above all, what it means to come home. And I've read this during a kind of like rough patch recently. I read this during the month of November. I was dealing with like some loss, dealing with grief, and so I had taken this with me when I went down to Alabama. And I was just reading this, and I think that it was the perfect book to read at that time. I think that Toni Morrison always is able to, you know, bring inspiration into my life, sort of like soothe me. And so this is definitely a book that I would say would be best read by people that have read Sula, Beloved, and The Bluest Eye. You have to be familiar with Toni's work to kind of get some of this book. There are references. You can see sort of like Easter eggs and references to her other work. But I loved Home. I thought it was really concise. It's only 145 pages. And I think that it is power-packed with so much knowledge. You can see just Toni Morrison's thoughts on, you know, a lot of political and social issues within this book's pages. And this was, she wrote this in 2012. And so, you know, I think it's always great to see the way that authors are able to kind of evolve and continue, you know, writing and building on their, on the rest of their like backlist. And so I think that this is another great Toni Morrison book for Toni Morrison fans. I think that this is definitely one that you will, if you get it, you get it. This was a book that I read with my book club. And Who? And I had an arc of this for a minute, and I told myself I was going to read it, but when the book actually wound up coming out, because a lot of times books come out that I have arcs for and I have never picked up. I'm really bad at reading arcs. But I decided that the book club book for the month of November was going to be People Person by Candice Carty Williams. And I had read Queenie, and I did a review of Queenie. I was not a huge fan of Queenie. I thought that the main character was toxic. I thought that the main character made absolutely terrible decisions without really coming to terms with just how bad those decisions were. Along with just like, I think that it was just a very questionable main character. And I think that Candice Carty Williams also really tried to, talk about a lot of like political issues, Black Lives Matter and different things like that in the book. And I don't think that they were handled well. I think that they were just kind of dropped in because it was kind of like hot at the time. And that's just my personal opinion. But with People Person, I went into it because I was like, hopefully I'll actually like a Candice Carty Williams book. And so this book is about all of these siblings that come together because their sister Dimple thinks that she has killed her boyfriend. So going into this, I did not have any idea that this was going to be like a murder mystery almost. I read it in the month of November because I thought it was about family. And I think it is. It's just I would say it's very difficult for me to say whether or not this book is good or bad. I think that a lot of the issues in the book could have been easily solved and they weren't. So Dimple is like she's a wannabe influencer who has like no following at all. She's kind of delusional in a way. It follows her and her siblings as they sort of like as they're trying to develop a relationship with each other after only meeting one time when their father picked them all up, threw them in a car, took them to the park for like 10 minutes, and then dropped them off both at home. And they never dropped them all off at home, and they never really saw each other much after that until Dimple thinks she has killed her boyfriend. And so they're building their relationships. They're also kind of just discovering who their father is. And so there's a lot of drama, and I think that it was interesting, but I don't think that it was good, So I think that, will I ever read a Candice Carty Williams book ever again? Probably not. I think that, 2 strikes you're out, but I think it was funny. I don't know if it was supposed to be as funny as it was. When the book club came together and we discussed this, we were just like cracking up. We had a great time discussing this book but we were talking about just how ridiculous it is. And so I don't know if it was on purpose, but I think that it was a book that, it's a good book club book, but I don't know if it's a good book, So People Person by Candice Carty Williams. We're inching slowly towards the end of the year. And I really was like not tracking things well. And so I had read this a little bit earlier than, it is on my list. But I'm So Not Over You by Kosoko Jackson. This was my another last strike read. So I had previously read Yesterday's History, which is a YA romance of sorts, written by Kosoko Jackson. And this is Kosoko Jackson's adult romance debut. And I'm not a fan. I feel like Kosoko Jackson's books always kind of give like anti-Black. Like, I don't know what it is about Yesterday's History. Both of the main characters' love interests are white. I talked about my issues with that aspect of the book when I did a review of Yesterday's History in one of my wrap-ups last year. But then I came back in this one because I saw that both of them are Black in this book. And also in this book, the love interest that he develops when Hudson like breaks his heart is this random white man who shows him his worth. I don't know, like Kosoko Jackson can't leave white men out of his books. And the Black characters are written with such a heavy hand that it feels like, even coming from a Black author, have you been around Black people? Do you know, like, yeah, yeah. I guess that's really the only way that I can say it. It was like, Kosoko Jackson was trying to be very political, talk about, like, the main character is supposed to be like this, like, anti-capitalist who just happens to be, like, pining after this uber rich guy who comes from a family that owns this brewery, and he's always complaining about how much money he has, and, you know, like, how he needs to, like, be more ethical and all these things like that. And I'm just like, I don't know why y'all like each other. No, at no point in this novel did I think that the two main characters actually liked each other. The only thing that Kian, the main character, the only thing that he says in reference to him actually liking Hudson, which also a terrible name, about liking Hudson, it sounds like a porn star. The only thing that he says that's positive about Hudson is the fact that he has, like, a nice body. And I'm like, so we don't know there's nothing else about Hudson that you like. In addition to that, you hate everything about Hudson and his family, their wealth. But you're constantly talking about how much things cost and being in awe of the money that he has. In addition to that, they constantly keep bringing up, because they had dated before and it's like a fake dating romance. At no point do you actually find out why they broke up, but they keep referencing them breaking up and that it was like, oh, this, you know, huge thing that caused them to break up, but we never actually find out why they broke up. So I just think it was a terrible romance. I think it was a terrible romance. I think Kosoko Jackson maybe needs to unpack some things, because I don't necessarily know if he likes Black people. It feels almost like this was written by a white person in blackface. And I know that's harsh, and I don't like trashing Black authors like that, but I've been so irritated by Kosoko Jackson just with these two reads. Like, I will never read anything by them ever again. So, 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Before I talk about the last book that I read in 2022, I did read a children's book called Our Table by Peter H. Reynolds. And I thought that this was such a lovely children's book. It's about this young girl who realizes that her family is, like, obsessed with, like, being on social media, using technology, and that they never sit down at the kitchen table and eat together anymore. And so she goes on this mission to, she tasks them all with building a kitchen table for them to eat at and enjoy family time. And it just reminded me so much of just, like, my family, in the way that, like, my parents always prioritized us sitting down and eating dinner together. You know, even through, like, high school, when I was, like, playing sports, when we were, like, doing other extracurricular activities, you know, we still always had this tradition of every single weeknight sitting down together and eating at the table and talking about our day. And that just instilled so much in me, you know, the value of family, you know, the value of conversation, the value of actually talking to people face to face. And, you know, like, my best friend didn't really have that growing up, and, you know, a lot of my friends didn't really have that that opportunity to sit down with their family and, you know, eat for a variety of different reasons. But when they would come over, they would be, like, in awe of the fact that we sat down at the table and talked to each other about our day. And so I just loved this book. I thought it was perfect to read during the month of November, and it was one of my staff picks at Prologue Bookshop. So I definitely would encourage all of you to pick this up. I've seen other Peter H. Reynolds books. Did not know that Peter H. Reynolds was white until I looked it up, but, you know, that's just a, you know, side note. It is a Black family, and a lot of his books do feature, like, protagonists of color, picture books with children of color. But, you know, it's almost one of those things, like, same with dude that wrote The Snowy Day. You know, I just love to see the characters, though, and so I thought that Our Table was a really great book. The last book that I read, I did start and not finish a lot of books. I'm still reading The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I thought I was going to finish that by the end of the year. Didn't. But the last book that I read was a romance. And it was my second Jasmine Guillory book of the year, Royal Holiday. This was our final read for the month of December in the Black and Love Book Club. And I think that we all thoroughly enjoyed this. It features an older protagonist, Vivian Forrest. She's actually on a work trip with her daughter, who is styling a member of the royal family. And, so her mother ends up meeting the Queen's personal assistant and private secretary, and they sort of like hit it off. She's attracted to him. She's trying to enjoy her time in England, and so they start spending a little bit more time together. And I just thought this was really cute. I thought it was nice. It was a really sweet read for the month of December. And we of course don't endorse colonizers. We don't praise monarchies and things like that. However, I think that Jasmine Guillory did a good job of kind of mentioning it for a second, inserting a little bit of like her opinion about the royal family and just like, And so this isn't like a royal romance. This isn't her falling in love with a prince. This is a Black woman falling in love with a Black man in England. And it just happens to be like this quote unquote royal holiday because they're staying in a palace mansion of sorts, owned by a member of the royal family. But other than that, it was just a really sweet, heartwarming romance. And both of the protagonists were older. They were in their, I think, 50s. I'm assuming 50s. Vivian is, because her daughter is like grown. So yeah, I just thought it was really sweet. So I'm going to be reading more by Jasmine Guillory. I think that if I'm ever stressed, I'm just going to pick up a Jasmine Guillory book. They do use the C word. And we talked about that in the book club. I need these. If you're a Black romance writer, the C word is a red flag. I let it slide, Jasmine. I let it slide. Don't do it again. I thought it was a very enjoyable romance. So definitely check out Jasmine Guillory's work. And, if Jasmine, if you ever dropping anything, dropping a new book and want to send me an arc, I'm always here. So yeah, that's everything that I read in the year 2022. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit long. I'm checking the time and, it's editing this is going to be interesting. However, let me know what some of your favorite reads were in the year 2022. What did you read? What did you like? What did you not like? Drop it in the comment section below. And I will see you all very soon. Hopefully you have a wonderful 2023. And, forget about 2022 if it wasn't that great of a year. Because I know it was stress for a lot of us. But thank you for checking out this video. I will see you all very soon. And always remember that you